Good morning, everybody. Well, we are sliding down the hill toward the end of this term. This is the beginning of week 6. And in week 6, for many of you, we're finally getting to the topics that interest you the most. And that is to say, excuse me, that's to say we're going to be talking about the elements of a criminal prosecution. Particularly, we're going to be talking about venue, what that means. We've already talked about that in an earlier week. But here, this week, we're going to apply the concept of venue to a criminal case, because a criminal case is what we're dealing with in our final project. Now, in a criminal case, venue is really very simple compared to a civil case. In a criminal case, venue is determined almost exclusively by where the crime was committed. The only hitch in that little determination is when you can't tell where the crime was committed. Sometimes that's because, let's say it's a murder and the body has been found in a particular location, but it's clear that the murder wasn't committed there. You don't really know where it was committed, and so sometimes the prosecution will take place where the body was found. Also, sometimes in modern criminal cases that involve a computer, it's very difficult to tell where the crime actually was committed. You know perhaps where its effects were felt. Let's say somebody has stolen all of the money in your bank account and your bank is located in Phoenix, Arizona. You know that the effects of that crime were felt in Phoenix, but you don't really know where the criminal was when the crime was committed. And that will bring up a venue issue as well. We're not dealing with that in our final project case because that's far too complicated for a 200 level class. But we are dealing with the concept of venue in a criminal case and how a choice of venue might affect the whole judicial process, how its efficiency is maintained, and whether its dockets or calendars are affected by a change of venue motion or the choice of venue itself. Again, please forgive me for my hoarse voice. I can't quite get over this whatever it is that's affecting my voice. So that will be your discussion board. You're going to be asked to choose or to find a criminal case, not a civil case, a criminal case in your home state, or if you don't want to do that, in another state, that involved a change of motion. What is wrong with me today? A motion for a change of venue. Let me get that straight. A motion for a change of venue. You need to read the case and determine who filed the motion, whether it was granted, why it was filed, and what the effect of it might have been if it was granted or not. Then for your short paper, you're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about two concepts in the criminal procedure that are pretty controversial off and on, and those are mandatory minimum sentencing and sentencing guidelines. Those are two very different things. With mandatory minimums, the legislature has taken away the discretion of the judge in imposing a sentence on a particular case. So that if you have a crime in a state and that crime has been defined by state law, the legislature has also gone on to define what the punishment for that crime must be, which means that the traditional judicial exercise of discretion in determining a sentence has been eliminated. But that doesn't mean that discretion has been eliminated. Because when you've taken away judicial discretion, what you've done really, and this was not the legislature's intent, but this has been the effect, what you've done really is to shift that discretion to the prosecutor. The prosecutor knows that if he or she brings a certain charge against an accused and that accused is found guilty, that a certain sentence must be imposed. Well, the prosecutor might not think that's a good sentence for this particular crime. Maybe it's too harsh, maybe it's too lenient. So what the prosecutor will do is exercise his or her discretion and decide whether to bring that particular charge. Maybe if the sentence for that charge will be too harsh or too lenient, What the prosecutor instead will do is bring another charge with another crime, maybe a lesser crime. Maybe he or she will try to fiddle with it and bring 2 crimes so that the sentence will actually be harsher. In other words, you haven't taken discretion away, you've shifted it onto the shoulders of somebody whose job shouldn't be sentencing discretion. That's my personal opinion. I don't care for mandatory minimums, as you will see when we get into our discussion board and other ways in which we interact with each other. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't, or you shouldn't argue with me and tell me why you do think that they're good, why mandatory minimum sentencing helps with judicial discretion, helps with judicial efficiency, helps in general to make the system work better. I don't think it does. But you might have a different opinion, and I'd like to hear from you to see what you think and why. The other concept that we're dealing with is the concept of sentencing guidelines, which is a milder version of a legislative imposition of what sentences in criminal cases should be. With sentencing guidelines, what the legislature has done is impose a range of punishments that will be appropriate for certain crimes. And the judge then still has discretion within that range on what sentence to impose. It doesn't take away judicial discretion, it just limits it to certain parameters. So your short paper is going to be about mandatory minimums, sentencing guidelines, comparing the two, and your opinion on whether they affect judicial efficiency and how they might affect it, whether they're for good or ill. Now, we are still in the midst of working on, or you are still in the midst, I don't have to do this, are still in the midst of working on your final project. But this short paper isn't a milestone toward that final project. It's kind of a separate paper in and of itself. But don't let that fool you. The final project does involve venue, certainly, and it also involves mandatory minimums and sentencing guidelines. So don't just write this short paper and then dismiss the topic from your mind, because you will have to revisit it again in the final project. Well, that's all for me this week on the video. I'll have a written announcement, of course, that goes with this, and I wish you the best of luck in preparing all your work this week. Bye.